You alright? My name's Paul, I've got autism, and I make random videos based on my version of autism and the way my head works, and I stick the videos on the internet, just in case you fancy giving them a watch. Anyway, I've not been around a while, again, but those on Patreon will know why. And I've also opened up something on Patreon on Tier 3 called Orating Autism, where we can have a chat, if anyone's bothered. But I wanted to slowly but surely try and come back over to YouTube as well, because I don't really think anything's ever going to change in the landscape of what people think they know about autism versus what autism really is. And it's a shame because, I've said it before, I'll say it again, but the autism landscape is governed by non-autistic people. And until we get listened to and invited to the conversations, they will only ever be able to assess what autism is off what we give, so off observation, whereas autistic people know all of autism is what's on the inside. And you do see that make its appearance every now and again, and I pay attention to comments from videos that I've done. And, look, positive comments are positive, and I like them. Thank you. I never ask anyone to ever leave that type of comment. But the fact that somebody would watch who's in my ballpark of autism and it resonates with them, then that's all I've ever wanted. And the fact that people feel good enough to reach out and say that is important. It matters. Much more so than people who leave negative comments, like, you're not autistic because you're not animated enough. Well, that shows you've got a very limited perspective on what autism is, but thanks for your input anyway. Grow a spine, grow a backbone. Go and find a hobby that's not leaving negative comments to strangers. That will always be weirder than I am. But then the mockery aside, there's also comments which are the ones which pique interest, because they show the divide of knowledge into what people think they know about autism versus what autism really is. And if I, for my version of autism, can try and share a few stories and a few perspectives to help certain people, or to even clarify for autistic people with the way they feel, then I'll try and do that. Because it's important for me to put the right narrative out there, whether it gets heard, picked up, whatever. It's like, if I can put it into the universe, hopefully the universe will do something with it. And speaking of comments, because I know this title of the video will be Autism and Narcissism or something similar to that, I want to give you an example of a comment that was left which demonstrates just how much people don't know about autism versus just how obvious the answer is when you're autistic. So someone left a comment and it said, what us normal people, great start, what us normal people don't get about autistic people is that you say you don't like people, you don't like humans, you don't want to interact with them, but then in the next breath say you miss socializing, you want friends, etc. Which is it? You can't have both. Again, to me, that's so simple. And I'll give you a lived experience explanation of that. So I've worked in a place, and I was recently talking to someone about something very similar. I worked in a place where when it had come to lunch time, that hour, that's mine, that I don't get paid for, but I've got to wait around to go back to work again, whereas I'd rather just work right through and go home an hour early, which makes more sense. I would spend the hour either going out into the town to go and get something to eat, I would sit in my car to eat on my own, or I would sit in the canteen, but I'd have earphones in, I'd be reading things, I'd be looking at things on my phone, watching football highlights, just being in my own little bubble, doing my own thing. Over time, people I worked with, they would start with little snarky comments like, oh, King Paul, you're too good to come and sit with us, are you? Your Royal Highness, do apologise, Just because I didn't sit with them, I thought I was better than them. No, I just didn't want to sit with people talking about the same thing I've just done for the last 3.5 hours. I wanted my time, I wanted to recharge. And that went from that to then me starting to feeling a bit standoffish with them. Not acting standoffish, but maybe then became quieter than usual because I didn't like the way that I was being mocked, And then what would happen is that mockery would get worse and it'd get stronger, and it would start to go to, oh, you're going to go and sit by yourself again this lunchtime, weirdo. What are you doing, you creep? Why do you sit by yourself? What are you up to? Not once did anyone ever in my entire history go, you always sit by yourself. Can I ask why? Because the answer would have been simple. I just like to recharge. I like to just, it's my own hour. This is my time, but I've got to wait around in work, so I'll do things I want to do. I just want to, watch, like I say, the football highlights that have happened over the weekend, or I just want to listen to music. I love music. I'd rather do that, so I just want to zone out and then go back to work. A really non-threatening answer with no threat to anyone, but because no one asks, you get treated as if you're a threat because, as I've noticed in my lived experience, nearly every non-autistic person I've come into contact with have a threat-based response system. So what they don't understand has an adverse effect on the way they behave, whereas autistic people generally have a defense-based response. So if you look at dogs, as an example, they will roll around on a dead animal to mask their scent, to hide themselves from predators. Arnold Schwarzenegger did it in Predator. He dragged himself through a load of mud and Predator couldn't see him. We do that, and we call it masking. We disguise ourselves to not present as a threat to the people who have a threat-based response. That's where masking comes from. That's why we have to mask. So, when it comes to that type of situation, why do we dislike humans but still want a connection with them? It's because of the way we get treated in these types of situations, and we're not doing anything wrong, but we get treated as if we are just because we want to be more, sat by ourselves in those moments. But it doesn't mean that we don't want a connection. We're just in the wrong tribe. We're just around the wrong people. So we'd love to be a part of things. We'd love our own connections and friends and things like that. But because we get treated badly for being different, it gives us a perspective of people which isn't overly favourable. So for a simple question, there's a bit of a longer answer, and I hope that makes sense and helps people. But when it comes to this has been thrown out a few times over the years, generally along the lines of, isn't autism just another word for narcissism? Or all the autistic people I know have always been narcissists as well. Or autism's been researched to be commonly linked to narcissism. If you knew what it was like to be an autistic person, you would actually understand something very, very, very simple. And that is, there is no greater threat, no more of a natural enemy to autism than narcissism. You would think that non-autistic people, being the absolute opposite of autistic people, would be the problem, but it isn't. The problem for autistic people is narcissists, but I do want to caveat that with something important. What I'm going to talk about with narcissism is I'm talking about the true traits of narcissism, the true traits of a narcissist, the toxic traits that then get exhibited. I'm talking about that. And I will also say that autistic people absolutely can be narcissists, but it'll be just as uncommon as it would be across non-autistic people. Okay? So everything I can share is more of a lived experience and me knowing I'm autistic and me knowing my differences versus narcissists. And I just want to sort of, with my little notes to keep me on track, because I'll go way over time as usual. So I just want to try and keep myself on task with it, just to try and explain it a little bit with sort of the most valid points. Because for people who don't know autism or narcissism very well, they will assume that we are quite similar because of the traits that we may exhibit. That outward display of things is very important because you're judged on so much of yourself from others, how you project. And that's where it can be a bit of a problem. So you look at what autism is, and in its most basic fundamental way I can explain it it's a difference. It is just a different operating system. It is not something bad. Whereas narcissism is something bad. It's a mental health condition. It's serious. It's something which can, if used to its full effect of toxic traits, ruin the lives of others. Whereas being autistic doesn't do that. So, you look at it again in its most basic form. Narcissists will have an inflated sense of self-importance. They will lack genuine empathy. And empathy is a big, big thing, whereas we just have an alternative way of looking at the world. We have different ways of processing sensory input, which is something they always use, but that needs to be further explained. It's too short a video to go into sensory inputs. But what I'll summarize it as is every scenario and situation we will ever go in is designed by non-autistic people in a non-autistic world, which is designed for the way that they are geared and set up, whereas ours, we wouldn't do it that way. So we have to do everything to the design of other people. So that's why we have a design misalignment, I suppose, is what I'm trying to say. But you look at empathy. Empathy is massive for when it comes to the absolutely incorrect judgment on autistic people. We get told we're not empathetic. We absolutely are empathetic. It's just how we choose to demonstrate or how we feel. And this is what I always try and get through to people. You will know what you see from us. You won't know anything about how we feel because you would need to ask us questions and we would need to be able to answer them. And I've always said you should never say, I don't know, when it's about yourself, because the one thing you owe yourself in this life is to know who you are completely. So if anybody ever says, why did you do that? You need to have an answer. But when you're looking at empathy, I've told people before I don't read, watch, or listen to the news. And the reason I don't do that is because I cannot deal with the way I feel over the atrocities that this world consistently creates. Because the news is just a publication of everything that is person-made, which can be avoidable, just being aired to the world. This is how horrible humans are. Let's just tell everyone about it. Now, I can't deal with that because I don't know why humans have to be so horrible to each other because of what they believe. I don't see why anybody has to do that. I think the world would cure itself if everybody treated everybody else the way they want to be treated. And everybody wants to be treated fairly and nicely. We just need to learn how to do it with each other. Shouldn't be a hard thing, but apparently it's the hardest things for humans to recognise. So keep me away from your news. But because I don't read, watch, or listen to the news, people tell me I don't care about the world. But the irony is I do care, which is why I can't do it. Because I'm too empathetic. I'm too connected to it. Empathy is there. It is always there. And we can be deemed, judged incorrectly over empathy. Because let's say somebody fell down the stairs and I was stood near the base of the stairs. I would see them fall, and in my mind I'm going, right, that person just fell down the stairs. Have they broken the neck? Are they in an awkward position? Because I can't move the head in case they've broken the neck. Are they still breathing? Are they all right? Are they awake? I'm not sure. I'll tell you what, I'll phone an ambulance. And while I'm thinking of this, which is still in 1 or 2 seconds, people have instantly gasped and rushed over and started to move the person into a recovery position because they were shown that once on a first aid training, whereas it might be the most unsafe thing to do if they have broke the neck. But because I'm just stood there staring because I'm computing, I am figuring out the best thing to do because I want to do it right. I don't just want to react and get it wrong. I just stand there looking like a big gormless lump. I'm just stood there going, staring at them, and then someone will go, will you phone an ambulance? Be useful. It's like, oh, sorry. And then they will gossip about you. Did you see them? They were just staring at them at the bottom of the stairs. What a weirdo. We have got empathy for the person, but there's also logic in that situation which needs to take place. So I'll feel bad that person fell down the stairs, and I hope they recover. It's deeply unfortunate, but in that moment, I'm not going to feel the empathy because there's logic to happen to make sure that person's all right. But unless you talk to us, you won't know that. So the difference is narcissists lack genuine empathy. They're not overly bothered. They will manipulate others for personal gain because unless it's happening to them, they're not bothered because it's not important, because nobody is more important than the narcissist. We're not playing that game. It's almost polar opposites. And if you hear any whistles or whatever, got a bit of a storm going on outside, so it keeps blowing through the trickle vents and setting the house off. There's also a big gap when it comes to authenticity. Autistic people are authentic generally. We speak directly. We get told we've got communication issues all the time, and I never know what you mean. It's like, but we're telling you nothing but the absolute truth. But for some reason, people would rather believe what they want to believe rather than the words that fall out of your face. And I don't know why. But then there's also that saying in the neurotypical world, isn't there? Never let the truth get in the way of a good story. Well, that's a horrible thing. The truth should always be the thing that matters. So we have this authenticity layer because honesty matters. And we will stay honest at the expense of social norms, which is if I take you back to when I'd sit in a canteen with my earphones in, doing what I wanted to do, that's because that's what I wanted to do. There was no harm anywhere. Whereas if I cared more about how I was perceived, I would have sat with everyone. Whereas the difference is, again, with the narcissist, they prioritize social status, their appearance, and they will care about that over their authenticity. Of course they will, because they want to get as far as they can, as quick as they can. And I've worked with narcissists. I worked with a narcissist in fire, which is the worst combination on earth. So we were having to deal at the time with things called alterations notices, enforcement notices, and prohibition notices. So an alteration notice just means something's a bit wrong with your building, get it sorted, we'll come and look at it, make sure you've sorted it, and we'll probably pop back periodically to make sure you keep your standard up. So they're not that serious, but they're just an improvement. The enforcement was get it fixed, or we'll take you to court and we'll close you down in the end. So you had a bit more of a severe output if you didn't do what you were told. I looked after every alterations notice that landed on my desk. He ignored them until they became enforcement, because when they became enforcement, the CEO also found out. So it was like, that's his way of getting his name in the CEO's ear. And then the CEO knows that he fixed that issue, so that puts him in good stead. But the reality was he was putting people's lives at risk because of his grandiose, self-inflated opinion of himself and wanting to make it as far as he could, as quick as he could. Whereas I just didn't care. I just did my job. So it does matter. We do struggle with the societal norms and the differences within it because it's not our societal norm, therefore it is different. But they do use the social interactions for personal gain. You look at the self-perception of how we view ourselves versus how narcissists view themselves. We are self-critical and introspective. I have told you before in many videos that when I went and worked at a certain company, I left somewhere because of the way I was treated, and I was willing to go anywhere else to fail. And I walked through that door. I felt like a complete fraud. I felt like the most stupid person in the room. And I have imposter syndrome because I never feel good enough no matter what I do. Whereas a narcissist has an inflated self-view and they resist criticism. You can't tell them they've done wrong. You can't tell them what they're doing is wrong. They get aggressive, they attack, they don't like it. You're wrong and you've just read what they're doing incorrectly because of their inflated self-view. So there's a massive divide straight away, because how could we be narcissists when nobody beats us up harder than we beat ourselves up? It's these polar opposites. So if you take some of the known traits of narcissism, one of them which can be crossed over into autism by those who don't know is playing the victim. Some people say autistic people play the victim all the time. I get it in comments, stop being a victim, drop that victim mentality. I'm sharing genuine snapshots of my lived experience. I'm not saying I'm sat here now still complaining about it and want a pat on the back and set up a GoFundMe so you can make me feel better. No, I'm telling you what's happened. And if you don't like it, that's just unfortunate. But I guarantee you this, it's people who say that who treated me badly. Because otherwise you'd actually see that all I'm doing is sharing a lived experience. I'm not saying everybody's horrible in the world. No. I'm saying that's what's happened in my life and I didn't deserve it. It's an unfortunate consequence and reaction just because I'm different than other people. But they will play the victim. Genuinely will. And here's a good example. Let's say they don't turn into work for 2 or 3 days and the phone's off, nobody can contact them. They will come out of the woodwork and contact their boss with an email or whatever it may be. And let's say they've split up from their partner. It will be, I'm so sorry I've not been in touch. I've been so hurt. I'm so devastated. There's all this power on how they feel, like excessively emotionally. Whereas I would never not contact my management if I was not going to be in work, because I couldn't live with the idea that there's an unknown. It's like there's an answer, we can give it, let's give it, and that way we all know and we can all move on, we can all move forward. So you absolutely, via your logistical mindset, everything needs to make sense because there's an order to things, whereas the narcissist doesn't really care who they let down, but then they want to make it seem like they've had the worst time of it when they finally reappear. Very, very different. They will be excessively charming or flattering. That guy I talk about who I used to work with, we also work with 3 women. Now, I'd walk in the room and I'd go, "You all right?" And I'd sit down. He would come in the room and go, "Morning, ladies. Whoa, you're looking glamorous today. Is that a new dress, Deborah? Doing all this weird stuff. And it's like, what are you doing? Sit down, you pervert. It's like there's no need for it. But he wanted to be seen, and he won. They fell for it, hook, line, and sinker. Like, oh, he's great, isn't he? Oh, he's a really nice guy. No, he's not. He's doing it on purpose. Why can't you see it? This excessive charm and flattery, because then when other people start to cotton on to them, they've won some superficial friends through that flattery, and they won't listen to the negativity about them. So it's all part of a manipulation tactic. We don't do that. We're honest. Like I said, it's a case of, does my bum look big in this? If you've got a big bum, the answer's going to be yes. Whereas he would go, "Of course not. That dress makes you look amazing. Wow." Frequent conversations about themselves. That's another thing which can be seen within autism as in a narcissistic trait, but I want to explain that. So a narcissist will always want to talk about themselves because they are the most important person in the room. Autistic people generally talk about themselves in situations where there's stories being shared, because we're not doing it to say, "Yeah, I heard you talk about you, but here's a story about me that's quite similar." We go, "Okay, I get your story, and here's my story to show you that I can connect with your story, that something similar happened to me too. So we're kind of similar like that." So we're doing it as a way of connecting. We're not doing it as a way because we're bored of listening to you and want to listen to about us. Like I said, there is an overreaction with criticism. They won't take it and don't take it. They think everybody else is wrong. Whereas we will hold it for a very long time. It'll disrupt our sleep because we try and do everything we can to avoid the criticism, because we just want it to be right first time, every time. And criticism absolutely stings because we generally put a hell of a lot of our personal effort into what we're trying to achieve. So when something misses, it really affects us. Whereas you can't get to a narcissist when it comes to criticism. There's also a pattern of the person is too good to be true. They will offer the world, like I say, very superficial. The things that they can offer, the things that they can do, the don't worry about it conversations, I'll sort that. It's like, where's this person been? I've needed someone like that around. And then they let you down because they are too good to be true. And they will also push boundaries, whereas autistic people need boundaries. Like it's one of the sort of comments I make that's quite throwaway. It's like, people care what they want more than the rules. Autistic people want the rules more than what they care about. So narcissists will consistently push boundaries. So if they have to follow the same chain to reach a director as the rest of us, they will still find another way to contact the director because they want a personal line to them. They've got to just always go above and beyond just a little bit more. But I'm aware of the time. So what I'll do is I'll just wrap it up sort of talking about why there is such a stark difference in what it does. And that's because autistic people are the natural prey to the predator, which is the narcissist, because we do rely on logic, we rely on truth. There's so much put into autism saying, how gullible are autistic people? And they say it as if it's a negative thing. Instead of going, there's actually nothing wrong with being gullible. We should be looking at why people want to lie, use and manipulate others. So we take a lot of things that are said to us at face value because we don't know why you'd need to lie. Just, if it's rubbish, if it's crap, if it's bad news, just tell us. If it's great news, just tell us. If it's boring, just tell us. You don't need to sugarcoat, you don't need to wrap up, you don't need to do anything about it. Just be honest, be logical, be truthful, be respectful, be just. That's how most of us want to live our lives. It's how I live my life. So you then have that in the path of a narcissist, you are just, they've hit the golden ticket. That is perfect for them because they can manipulate that, they can abuse that, they can drag it out for as long as they want. And the problem is what it leaves in the wake of that is the autistic person. It isn't a case of us catching their lie or not believing what they tell us. What happens is the pattern that they try and weave, that tapestry they try and create, we start to see flaws in it. So they can't keep up with the amount of lies that they will create, the amount of deception or manipulation they try and pull over us. And we start to find, like a detective would, start to find all these little gaps. The tapestry, like I say, isn't woven correctly. They haven't caught every stitch. And then we'll go, oh, that happened on Tuesday. I thought you said it happened on Wednesday. And we're not saying that to go, caught you. We're going, there's a flaw in the story. Which one is the correct version? Because we need the truth. And more of that starts to unravel and unfold. And in the end, you realize what's been happening. The problem is, by that point, you could have been drained of resource, finances. You might have signed on to a house with them, so they now own half of it. You could have lost a business, lost friends, even had children who don't want to know you anymore because you put your trust and faith in this person who was too good to be true. So by the time you've cottoned on and you realize and you've got them away because our trust and honesty has been exploited by them, we've lost a hell of a lot more than the narcissist in our lives. Now, I'm thankful I've never, unfortunately, been stung too hard by this, but because I've been having conversations with autistic people who've shared stories when they've had interactions with them, it's definitely worth putting it on the map. So autistic people are not narcissists by default, but we're very vulnerable to them. So when people do pop up and they go, oh, isn't autism just another word for narcissism? Absolutely not. Everybody else is much more robust against the narcissist. You will catch them quicker. You will see them quicker. You will identify them straight away when they start being a little bit weird and a little bit creepy. And we just take what they say as the truth. And unfortunately, it doesn't land us in the best waters. But by the time we know, it is far too late. So to say autism by design is narcissism does a ridiculous disservice to autistic people who've unfortunately fallen into the trap of these people, because they are, and I'll reiterate it again, our natural enemy. By design, by neurological difference versus a mental health condition. It's just an unfortunate alignment where one side massively, massively benefits and the other doesn't. So to answer that question, no, autism isn't narcissism. But there will be some autistic people who are narcissists. I agree with that. Anyway, I hope that made sense. And until next time, thanks for watching and keep smiling.